What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, with you as always. And guys, today we're continuing the positional breakdown. We're going to start with the defensive tackles. But before we hop into that, I just want to say this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to visit the Prize Picks app today or online and use the code BTJ when you sign up for a $100 deposit match. Guys, we wanted to I actually brought this idea to Cody to break up the defensive tackles and the defensive ends because, I mean, you look at it right now, clearly there's a lot of depth everywhere in these groups right now. You have about 15 names between the edge group and the defensive tackle group right now before cuts, obviously. So I figured it would be a good idea to split them up, kind of talk about a few things here and there. So we'll go ahead and hop straight into it. And we're going to start with the first player here, and that is the all-pro defensive tackle, DeForest Buckner. Has been a staple of this defense ever since coming to Indianapolis in 2020. Actually got an extension this offseason. Will be extended through 2026. DeForest Buckner's name speaks for itself at this point. He's one of the most dominant defensive tackles in the league. I mean, what more can you say about a guy in DeForest Buckner?
Yeah, criminally underrated. I mean, we don't talk about DeForest Buckner probably enough even on the show, but I mean, he is really the heart and soul of that defensive line. I mean, there's no question about it. He has been so consistent since coming to Indianapolis via trade in 2020, like you mentioned, and just really from year one put a staple on this defensive line room and has been the model of consistency, even when he hasn't necessarily had a lot of help, especially on the edges from getting after the quarterback. So DeForest Buckner, though, he has been just so dominant and, just been a guy that I don't think we, like I mentioned, give him his flowers like he deserves a lot of times. He's just been so good. And, he's so critical to this defensive line and what they do. And I would say, Derek, I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's one of the better defensive tackle / three tech guys in Indianapolis Colts history at this point. I mean, he has been that good for the Colts, and we don't talk about him near enough. I'll keep saying that, because it's kind of hopefully trying to make up for a little bit for the lack of conversation around DeForest Buckner. But yeah, I mean, just the ultimate pro's pro and just a fantastic player, and very thankful for DeForest Buckner and that he's been on this organization, and such a loyal guy too. I mean, we all know the rumors that came out last offseason, I believe it was, about, Buckner wanting out, Buckner quickly squashing those, and just wants to remain with Indianapolis and be a part of what they're doing. And hopefully the Colts can get him, a Super Bowl at some point, because I think there's no player more deserving on this roster than DeForest Buckner at this point. I mean, he has been so good for Indianapolis and well worth the addition in 2020.
Absolutely. Yeah, and, to your point, I don't know, like, stats-wise, how he'll rank amongst the all-time defensive tackles of Indianapolis, but I would definitely stake my right arm to say that DeForest Buckner is the most talented defensive tackle that Indianapolis has ever been graced with. I don't really think that's much of a discussion as far as numbers go. We can always break those down, but we can move on to another player, and that is Grover Stewart beside him, who also got an extension this offseason. He was actually a free agent going into this year, but got a 3-year, $39 million extension to stay with Indianapolis. Cody, I mean, we talked about it a lot when he missed several games last year due to a suspension, and we talked about it over the offseason a lot already too, that, this Colts offense, or this Colts defense, gave up about 104 yards per game rushing when he was in there. And then versus when he wasn't on the field, gave up about 152. So the drastic difference in Grover Stewart not being on the field in the run game is major. Chris Ballard certainly was not about to let a guy that impactful to the run stopping game be able to walk out the building without a new contract. Talk to me about Grover Stewart. I mean, again, another guy that just does all the right things. He's a true Indianapolis Colt, and I mean, he's definitely the right guy for the job.
Yeah, I mean, talk about like one of the better draft picks for Chris Ballard ever. He's been absolutely fantastic ever since coming to Indianapolis in 2017 in that fourth round. And he's just, I mean, he's great. He's such a great player. Just fantastic, fantastic run stopper. And even though he's getting up there, he has continually, routinely been up there amongst the top one techs in the NFL. And like you mentioned, you saw how valuable he is last year when he went out, right? You saw how much the Indianapolis Colts missed him last year when he was on the field versus not on the field. So definitely was a major loss for them, but I'm glad they're able to lock him in for the next couple of years and keep him around the organization because, you really, you noticed how much teams were able to do a lot more against this Colts defense last year without Grover in there. And so, yeah, definitely a player that is so valuable to what the Colts do on defense and, really helpful in making offenses very one-dimensional, right? And that's a really, really great thing and helps out everybody, right? With a guy like Grover Stewart in there who, is so good at his craft. So, yeah, absolutely love Grover Stewart. Glad he's been there, a homegrown guy, and he has continuing routinely been one of the best one techs in the NFL.
All right, we start going to the backups here. And we'll talk about the guy that actually was one of the few outside free agents that was brought into this Indianapolis Colts team this offseason, and that is Rayquan Davis, defensive tackle from Miami. Rayquan now comes in 6'7", 325 pounds. Definitely is the biggest defensive lineman that the Indianapolis Colts have. And that's saying something because DeForest Buckner is 6'7" and is 300 pounds himself. So Rayquan Davis is just as big, if not bigger, in that aspect. So Rayquan Davis comes in, not entirely sure what his role will be. We presume he's just going to be another run stuffer up the middle. Again, just kind of being one of those backups to Grover Stewart. Gives him a chance to get off the field every once in a while, even on running down situations, or even in those situations where, you're having goal line stuff happening. Having another big body like this can definitely go a long way. Talk to me, Cody, about your feelings on Rayquan Davis this year.
Yeah, talking about Rayquan Davis, Derek, you already mentioned it. I mean, just a massive human being in general, right? And, you look at him, 6'7", 330 pounds. I mean, dude, just a mammoth of a man, no question about it. And it goes back to what we just said with Grover Stewart, right? It's like you saw how terrible, frankly, that you had behind Grover Stewart. You didn't have anybody, right? You had no defensive lineman on your current roster that could fill that role even adequately. You didn't have anybody, right? You tried to throw in Tav Bryan, didn't really do very well in that one tech role, right? You tried to throw in a bunch of other guys, and nothing seemed to work. And so now you have another guy that's not just as big as Grover, but bigger. Like, I'll take that, and another guy, and a guy that's still very young in Rayquan Davis, right? He's only 27 years old, was a former high-round pick in the draft, so he's got the talent, no question, and he's going to be in that reserve role, which I think will be definitely great. But, with Grover Stewart getting a little bit up there in age, I think it's definitely not a bad thing to have just another quality option back there and really just feel like you have that middle secured. If you ever need him to step in a pinch as a starter, I think he can do that and provide, some quality minutes for you, on quality snaps on that defensive line. And you feel like you kind of insured yourself on that defensive line in that interior a lot more this offseason than you had in the prior offseason, right? And that was kind of one of the big themes that Chris Ballard focused on during this offseason on both the offense and defensive lines was about adding that quality depth in there, right? And he did a great job on both of those units to do that. And I know we'll talk about the defensive ends at another point. But when it comes to Rayquan Davis, definitely a great Grover insurance and just another big, massive human being in that middle that I mean, the Indianapolis Colts are going to be pretty tough to run on, I think, if all guys are healthy and Rayquan's in there too. It never hurts to have massive guys on your roster to fill some of those run lanes and just help you out in all those departments. So, yeah, love Rayquan Davis. That was probably my favorite outside signing. I know the Colts didn't have many of them, but I like the Rayquan Davis signing because you quietly needed another guy in there, and you got Rayquan Davis, and I think he's going to provide some really quality snaps behind Grover, with Grover getting a little up there in age, and just that insurance is going to be helpful.
As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Absolutely. All right, we move on to the next guys here. And this is a player, Cody, that I think you and I both agreed we didn't want on this roster. Maybe he won't be when cuts happen. I don't know. But he did get an extension this offseason. I wouldn't even necessarily call it an extension. It's more just a bare minimum contract. But that is Tav Bryan, who originally came from Cleveland in 2023. And we were hoping that Tav Bryan would be able to be a backup option potentially for Grover Stewart in the pass rush department. Maybe thought he might potentially take another step forward, who had, 4 sacks in 2022, but ultimately did not have a good season last year, was ranked as one of the worst pass rushing players of the entire defense. So talk to me about Tav Bryan real quick, man.
In an ideal world, he doesn't see the field. I mean, that's just kind of what it was. You backed yourself into a corner last year with having Tav Bryan, and you thought maybe you could tap into some of that former first-round pick, Tav Bryan, but I mean, it really was not great last year. And, I think he could be a guy, Derek, that I wouldn't be shocked if he's cut. Now, he could be, kind of that last one of those interior guys on this roster, but I mean, again, it's a guy that has talent, no question about it, but just wasn't a great season for him. Now, maybe you think if he slides down to that 3 tech now with Rayquan on the roster, maybe he provides some better minutes there. Maybe that's more of a natural fit for him. And maybe then you're like, okay, his weaknesses are not so much amplified as they were playing that one tech last year when Grover went out. So that's kind of my hope with it, is that if he plays more of that 3 tech, he can kind of tap into some more of those abilities that he has, because he's not the biggest defensive lineman in the world. He's like 290 pounds, so not nearly as big, but he still is 6'4", but not probably the size you're thinking for a 1 tech necessarily. But he could probably play more of that 3 tech. That's probably more of his speed and style. So I'm hoping that kind of helps him out moving forward. But yeah, no, it wasn't great at the 1 tech, but I'm hopeful he can do something in some. Hopefully he never really sees the field, but if he has to, can provide some decent minutes from that 3 tech.
Yep. All right. We move forward down the line here. We're going to just go ahead and hop into another one here. A draft pick in 2022 that also had a struggling year as well, and that was Eric Johnson II. Cody, go ahead and give me briefly what you think of Eric Johnson II there.
Not super impressed with him. I think he might be a camp body, to be honest with you. He'll have a chance to compete, but yeah, I haven't really been impressed in the couple of years that Eric Johnson's been here. He's not really been a guy I've super been impressed with, and so wouldn't be shocked at all if he's a roster cut, to be honest with you. But he's got a chance. He's got an opportunity.
Yep, and then the last one on this list here, and that is Jonah Lulau, who was a 7th round draft pick this year for the Indianapolis Colts, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Cody, we expect him to be a camp body. Are we thinking that's going to stay the same even now?
Probably practice squad, camp body. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's got the physical tools, right? We saw that, but I mean, yeah, not really even in college wasn't very impressive. So I'm not holding my breath that he makes an impact on this roster. Like the same with Eric Johnson. It's like he's got a chance, an outside chance, but I'm not really expecting him here in year number 1. I mean, you saw even last year when the Colts go for traits in the later rounds, those guys typically are on the practice squad for a while, right? They're trying to hone in on their ability, physical ability, and actually turn them into good football players, right? But it's a shot in the dark for me that he does really anything with this team, but we'll see. He definitely got the physical ability, and hey, that's something to work with at least.
Absolutely. And then the final player here for the Indianapolis Colts at the defensive tackle position, and that was a draft pick from the I think it was the 2023 draft class, and that is Adetomiwa Adebawari, who we didn't see a lot of last year. Was actually a healthy scratch for the back end of a lot of games last year, presumed probably just to make room on the roster. But Adebawari actually did, a couple of good things last year. Cody did have a sack in the Panthers game, did get a few snaps on special teams this last year. Do you expect his role to potentially increase, or do you think that he's going to just remain that special teams guy for the majority of the year?
I mean, I think honestly, for me, it's between him and probably him and Tav Bryan competing for that backup 3 tech at this point. I know he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's a hair undersized there, a little bit shorter of a player, but I do think he has an opportunity with the Indianapolis Colts, right, to compete here with Tav Bryan, has a chance to really take that on because, I mean, I think we would both say, Adetomiwa had a lot more flashes than Tav Bryan last year. And so I'm hoping he gets more of a role because I don't think we talk about him. I think he's a good player. I just think he's kind of, was kind of lost in the shuffle last year with this defensive line room. And I don't think he got much of an opportunity. So I'm hoping they give him a little bit more of that because I think this kid's got a lot of ability. So I'm really, really hopeful in year number 2 that he gets more than just some special team snaps, that he actually starts contributing on this defensive line and can win out against Tav Bryan for that 3 tech, that backup 3 tech, and can be that guy moving forward that you feel pretty good about, if DeForest Buckner needs some time off the field, and I'm sure he will. He'll take some breaks. He's getting older too, right? So you need, to be able to kind of play in waves, right? I think the Colts intend on doing that. And I think he'll have an opportunity. If he can beat out Bryan, he'll have an opportunity to get some quality snaps in there. So I'm hopeful that he's the guy there for that 3 tech. And then I think, Derek, if he is and he proves to be a very quality backup, you feel really good about your first and second unit in that interior. Like, you really do feel good with him and Rayquan Davis as those two backup guys that can come in and, obviously it's going to be a drop off, but it's not going to be nearly what it's been in years past. So, yeah, I love Addy Tamiwa. He can kind of play a little bit everywhere. I think he can probably play some defensive end if you need him to, but I think primarily his role is going to be competing for that backup 3-tech.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. That's the positional breakdown for the defensive tackles for the Indianapolis Colts. Let us know your thoughts and feelings on this position group going into the 2024 season. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for all the support. And as always, guys, go Colts.